So, without further ado, let me begin. Marcia, let me start with you. You have 2 decades plus of experience in emerging market banking, investment management, and portfolio management around the world, including here in Kazakhstan. How do you view the role of private equity in modernization, in economic transformation? What are some of the lessons you've seen here in Kazakhstan and around the world? And why don't we start there to help frame the discussion going forward?
Well, first I want to say good morning and thank you all for being here. This is a very important panel, in fact, because the role of private equity has to be considered within the context of Kazakhstan in the context of modernization. Underpinning everything you said about sustainable development, modernization. Private equity is not a panacea. It's not going to solve all the issues for the economy. However, private equity is a needed source of capital for development. And what's very interesting about understanding the role of private equity is that in countries where local capital markets are not developed, in countries where you have struggling banking systems, in countries where internal capital are not forthcoming, or debt is prohibited in terms of interest rates or etc., private equity investment can be a very helpful alternative to help in modernization. Now, what do I mean by that? Where do we employ private equity? Why is that important? Private equity would be great for privatization assets that are not ready to go to IPO, or when IPOs are too expensive. They're great for corporate restructurings, which is part of modernization as well, because you have to improve your value chain or you become obsolete. And that is some of the issues that emerging market companies have, and countries, is that they cannot keep up with the technology and development. So lower trade barriers, more competition, globalization does require for you to have more of a process-oriented, technology-oriented innovation. So when you look at the role of private equity and how it could be useful to Kazakhstan, what you have to think about, or the emerging markets in general, is how can private equity help you in innovation? How does it help with innovation? What happened in Asia, for example, is that with private equity, amongst other tools, they leapfrogged economically. And this is where private equity can be a useful policy tool for modernization, when it focuses on innovation, when you bring labor and capital, when you help, yes, capital, human capital, to develop and have higher skills, forced by the efficiency focus of a private equity manager or a private equity partnership. Now, we also have to talk quickly when we talk about modernization and the ushering of private equity, and again I say it's not a panacea, it's a tool, is that you have to have a pillar, you have to have a structure where private equity can flourish. That means governments need to focus on the legal structure of the country, political risk, corporate governance adherence, and the ability to understand that when a private equity manager comes in or investor comes into a company, the goal is for efficiency. With that may be loss of employees, but with that also could be the development of human capital, so that skill sets become more competitive in the country vis-a-vis neighbors. The challenges in Kazakhstan, in my opinion, in terms of private equity, is the fact that exit strategies, which are very important for private equity investors, are limited. You don't have a local capital market that is very robust. It's hard to exit through an IPO. So that makes you have to be focused more towards another strategic investor. You don't have a secondary market where developed market PE companies can sell to another PE company an asset that they want to offset. So these 2 challenges are big, and another aspect is sometimes the returns. The risks that initial private investors will look in the country, the returns are not at the same level of what you would see in a developed market, understandably so. So in terms of, how do we usher in private equity, grow private equity internally, bring in private equity within the modernization context, in terms of policy, it's important for the country to focus on these key initiatives, these pillars.
Marcia, thank you very much.